Hi, and welcome to another month where we get to explore emotions and what that means for you. And I'll start off today by saying I really send out a heartfelt sense of love to all of you that I know have been struggling with corona yourself, been working through things. Many of you have faced death. Some of you have faced a lot from the looting and the riots. And so I send you a huge amount of supportive love, knowing that we're all going through so much at the moment. And that really gives us the backdrop to today's conversation, is giving us a little bit of an overview of what the emotional impact is for us as we go through change like this. And so when we say the emotional impact of change, firstly we need to just start noticing that there's different levels of change that we can experience in our life. All of us in the world of work are used to change, dealing with change management, processing change, etc., etc. But when we start looking at change according to a number of factors, we can start to see what the impact of that change is. So the first factor we can look at is how expected or unexpected the change is. Sometimes we know something's coming. We can sense it, we can see it. When we look at the world today, we have quite a lot of unexpected change that has hit us. The next thing is to what extent it happens gradually or all of a sudden. Now, if we go back a year and a half to when March and the coronavirus and the pandemic started, it was a very sudden overnight change in many ways. And we're still dealing with this idea of it being it just hit us. It came out of nowhere. So we didn't have time to get used to it. Certainly as the year and a half has gone on, or the time has gone on, we're getting more and more accustomed to it. But you'll see there's another dynamic that comes up shortly. So we've got how unexpected or expected it is, how gradual or how sudden it is. Then to what extent does it impact my life? We have some change that's quite contained. I might have a change that impacts me only in my work life, or only at home, or only in the sense of my physical health, or whatever it is. But to the extent that it becomes pervasive, it impacts my relationships, my financial well-being, my mental health, my sense of stability in the world. The more pervasive the impact, the more difficult the change is for us to deal with. And the fourth factor is to what extent it happens and I can get on with things. I can come to terms with that happened, it's an event. And then things return to normal, so I can start getting a level of stability. Or to what extent is there continual change, continual uncertainty? The more we have these four factors in place, the more unexpected, the more sudden, the more pervasive, and the more continual it is, the more this falls into the category of trauma. And so we can start to see that pretty much all of us are responding to trauma at the moment. We have a before times and an after times. We know that our world is no longer the same as it was. And that trauma creates a different response to that change. And so I'm going to take you through what I call the corona coaster, a way of noticing that we go through various stages trying to process this change. And there's different emotions that come up for each of these stages. And you can see this for yourself and for others. Your family, your clients, your friends, your colleagues. Every one of us will be riding this coaster in a different way. So the corona coaster, or the roller coaster of change, however you want to think of it, has got 5 stages to it. And please don't think of it linearly, like most of us want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's done. It's cyclical, so we can move around these stages, a little bit chaotic. But the first stage is a stage that we call reacting. This is where it happens, something happens to us, and we just have to react. And the typical response to reaction is we go numb. We walk around and we just take action. We get very busy, actually, doing things that need to be done. Random things sometimes, not even the thing that may need to be done, but we want to do something. We tend to also go into a place of denial. It's not really that big a deal. We minimize it. Others have it much worse. It could be much worse. We feel guilty that we're even going through this because we don't really know how else to feel. And many of us can withdraw at this stage. And so this is an important phase to look at and to notice what's the typical strategy you have for reacting to things. If we looked at what it is that we need at this stage, it's to talk. We need to be able to express ourselves without somebody denying our experience. Whatever it feels like is accurate for you. One of the strange things we see happening at this time when we see reaction is quite a lot of humor. Now we can have humor that's really, really amazing at helping us process things, but we're going to have humor that's just trying to minimize things. In the beginning, when we had Cyril Ramaphosa doing talks, within 20 minutes there were memes all over the place. A way of trying to minimize it is to use humor. Natural, normal, nothing to feel guilty about, but worth noticing, so you can see this in yourself and others. The reaction phase moves into a coping phase. And what happens when we cope is we get very, very busy. We get very busy trying to get back in control of things. We just want to feel like it's going to be okay. And if we don't have to sit still, or if we don't need to pause, we can suppress the emotions for a while. And so there's a lot of doingness. You can see this in the world of work, where everybody just, set up everything at home, got sorted, getting it on, doing what needs to be done. And in that, the underlying feeling is a huge amount of overwhelm and anxiety that starts to build. Every time anybody tells you they're anxious or overwhelmed, it's a really, really important state of saying, I'm just trying to cope with everything. It's too much. I'm just trying to stay on top of it. And the thing that happens for many of us here is we don't pause. We don't ask for help. We don't create space to pay attention. We just fill up our time with activities to try and make ourselves feel better. And so we start to see things like addictions and coping mechanisms becoming a much bigger factor for people. Now, coronavirus and certainly the pandemic and working from home has amplified that, because many of our coping mechanisms have been taken away too. Going to church, going to friends, going out, even going to gym for some people. Various things that you would have done in the past just to have a break from life, you don't really have anymore. And so that amplifies it even more. The more pervasive coping becomes, the more we start to see a lot of anger. And that these angry outbursts that are fueled by fear start to look for someone to blame for the way my life is right now. And this is really, really something that can become very toxic very quickly. Is the more we look for someone to blame and to take out our anger on, and we can see that in social media circles, we can see that in the news, the more we stay stuck. We aren't able to move into the next phase, and that is the phase of dealing with it. Dealing with it means I start to feel it. It means I start to become aware that there's loss. That the way it was before is not the way it is now in my life. That loss can be pervasive because of somebody I've lost. That loss can be because I've lost stability. I've lost my faith. I've lost hope. I've lost control. I've lost a sense of knowing how things are. This grief takes us into a place of real despair. And it's normal and important to process it. And what this needs is it needs compassion, kindness, gentleness. Now, most of us start to enter into this world of grief, and we pull back very quickly into our coping mechanisms. We don't move through it. Healing requires feeling, and it's the most important thing that we need to start creating space for. This is somewhere that we see toxic positivity having a huge impact on people. Because as people start going into grief, we start saying things like, it's not that bad. You only get what you can deal with. Suck it up. Just wait it out. At least it's not this bad. It could be so much worse. And the minute that happens, we just go backwards and we get stuck. Whilst we're grieving, we also can start to see the possibility of what else could happen. What is being invited, what is new. And so this is the segue between our old life and our new life. And if we move through this with a sense of kindness to each other, we can move into what we call the creative phase. That's where we start to look for ways to do things differently. This is very different to ways to cope. Coping is a copy-paste kind of thing. Creating is what's possible now? What could we do differently? Instead of just putting all training online, we start to look at new ways of training. We start doing things differently. This is a playful phase. It's a place of learning. It's a place to surround yourself with people that have new ideas. But do this when people are in coping mode, and it just adds to the overwhelm. This is a natural, inspired interest in possibility. But it does require removing the fear of failure, because we have to practice and try and play around to see what can become possible. And as we move through that, we'll finally move into the phase of integration. And integration means I find myself again in my life. I don't feel like the world's happening to me. I feel like I have a sense of control, that I'm aligned back with some sense of purpose and my destiny. I can do what I'm here to do. There's a sense of renewed meaning and identity, and joy starts to come back, and truly, truly feeling excited, making plans for the future starts to happen here again. As you listen to this today, take a moment to just explore the various phases that come up for you, and to ensure that you ask for support or give yourself permission to experience the phase that you're in. We're in a world of continual stress, so it means this roller coaster keeps going round and round. But there is ways for us to move through it. Sending you lots of love. Namaste.